Welcome back to another We Ourselves video. Today I want to talk about episode 5 of the Ahsoka series, Shadow Warrior, or as I like to say, Shadow Work. Whenever I'm conducting a writing class and we come to feedback and critiques, we always begin with something positive and then move into the more constructive feedback. So I want to do the same thing here. First and foremost, Lucasfilm and Disney Star Wars continues to do a fantastic job with their special effects. Seeing the Purgils or space whales in the planet's upper atmosphere, as well as in space flying between the Republic cruisers, was awesome in a live-action show. Ahsoka's flashback to the Clone Wars and her relationship with her former master Anakin Skywalker was also awesome to see in live action, and the clone troopers were real this time instead of computer generated like they were in the prequel series. And if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, but I thought I heard Ashley Eckstein's voice for one of the younger Ahsokas in this episode. For those of you who don't know, she voiced Ahsoka in the animated series, and I can't be sure, but I thought one of the young actresses actually sounded like the original voice actor. I love the fact that we finally get to see a lot of Hera's ship, the Ghost, and as always, I love and appreciate the music in the show, which is composed by Kevin Kiner, who also worked on the animated series. I'm glad Jason is finally revealed as Force sensitive, and we get a quick explanation that his father was a former Jedi, Kanan Jarrus. And that's most of the big exciting things and the positive things that I want to mention. And again, I'm going to get into Ahsoka's whole flashback sequence in a moment, but I really want to just quickly address some of the things that I still have a problem with the show. And I just want to quickly do that so we can get to the Ahsoka part. First, you have a Jedi droid who's introduced to a child that has legit Force ability. When Jason asks the droid if he will train him or teach him to make a lightsaber, the droid's immediate response is no in both cases. Yet, this same droid, in between disparaging Sabine, nevertheless encourages her to continue her Jedi training with Ahsoka, even though Sabine has no Force ability. I don't get that. And by the way, I'm still not convinced that Jason knows who his father is. But maybe that's just me. In this episode, Hera continues to not really be Hera, in my opinion. She had story arcs and things that went on through the animated series that seem to have been dropped. For example, she should have known about the Purgils or the space whales. Now, to be fair, the episode really didn't make it clear if she knew they were in the upper atmosphere. But once they revealed themselves, she should have immediately been on board for what Ahsoka was proposing to do. Thankfully, Jason mentions that Ezra did the same thing with the whales when he took Thrawn to another galaxy. At least we finally got that acknowledgement and again, a mentioning of what Ezra did. Also, when it comes to Hera being a New Republic general, a title that's repeated over and over again continually, I find that her flagrant ignoring of the chain of command and her orders isn't exactly the Hera that we knew from the animated series. Yes, she was with the rebel group, but as a pilot, she had her team join the larger rebellion, and she was the one that always lectured them on the need to work with the other groups. She was always the voice of reason and the one that would say stick to the mission, while being a little bit flexible in what she was doing. Yet in this series, it's almost like she's been dialed totally to the opposite direction, to where she just ignores orders so much that the New Republic intends to take her command. Again, it's like the characterization seems off for Hera. But anyway, those are the quick complaints that I had when I'm thinking about this episode. Now I want to turn to Ahsoka's journey, because this episode personally was a turning point for me. But before I go any further, I think it's important to establish my take on the Jedi, Sith, and the themes within Star Wars. If the Jedi and Sith existed in our modern world, you wouldn't find them at the local mosque or temple or synagogue or church. They would be labeled occultists or practitioners of the occultic arts. They use cyclomancy, psychometry, telepathy, levitation. They commune with spirits and dead people, to just name a few things. They would have been burned as witches and wizards in medieval times, and it's no coincidence that to outsiders within the Star Wars universe, they're sometimes called wizards or magicians. George Lucas and Dave Filoni are well aware of this. in occult work, force work, one of the most important things is to do what they call shadow work. Basically, that's you going within yourself to find the answers within. You have to face that shadow side of yourself that you've either tried to ignore, or in the case of Kylo Ren, insist that you can kill but couldn't. The shadow self, if unacknowledged, will negatively affect you and everything you try to do. But another way, you have to save yourself. And to do that, you have to first go within and make peace with your past and your shadow side of yourself. Because if you don't, you can't have balance in your life. And what we see in this episode is Ahsoka going within to make peace with her past and her shadow warrior. And that's why I called this episode Shadow Work. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen this in Star Wars.
And you must go.
What's in there?
Only what you take with you.
And when Luke went inside the cave and he fought and defeated what he thought was Vader, Luke discovers that he was really fighting himself. This is the very essence of shadow work. Either you make peace with that part of yourself in your past, or you don't have balance in your life. And that's why Luke failed. That's why Kylo Ren failed, because we see him avoiding his shadow self. In Kylo Ren's case, it was his good side that he was trying to destroy, but he couldn't. Ahsoka clearly has a shadow self, or as the show title says, she has a shadow warrior that she's been trying to suppress or ignore. And so the flashbacks make perfect sense, because Ahsoka basically is accusing Anakin of having tainted her training. And that's why she keeps seeing him flip between Anakin and Darth Vader. This is her mind trying to come to terms and make a decision about her training. This is straight up shadow work for any occultist, which again, the Jedi and Sith are, just existing on opposite extremes of the concept. This is also why I believe that what we are seeing is not the actual Anakin Skywalker Force Ghost. It can't be. It can't be Anakin. Why? Because when you do shadow work, and I think Filoni and Lucas believe this, when you do shadow work, you have to go it alone. Anakin's Force Ghost could not help her, just like Yoda couldn't help Luke when he went into the cave, and neither could Obi-Wan's Force Ghost appear and help Luke either. Luke had to go in there by himself and face himself. Likewise, Ahsoka has to go inside and face herself. And I think that's why at the very end, after Ahsoka is rescued, she says, Anakin, as if she's finally sensing his real Force Ghost or presence. Think about it from this point of view. If the real Anakin Ghost had appeared, Ahsoka would have directly blamed him for everything that went wrong in her training. And that's another principle. For the occultist or the Force user, you can't blame somebody outside of yourself for what you are. You have to take responsibility for yourself and face yourself and save yourself. If Filoni believes these things, and I think he does because of the name of this episode, then it only makes sense that what we saw was not the actual Anakin Force Ghost. In fact, I'll go even further, and I'm willing to bet that one of Ahsoka's problems is that Anakin hasn't appeared to her. We know he appeared to Luke, and Luke would have told Ahsoka because, they're both connected to him. There's no way they didn't have a really deep discussion, which brings me to that line in the show where Ahsoka says, "I'm not going to fight you." When Anakin replies, "Well, I've heard that before," some people insist that this indicates that, this is Anakin's real Force Ghost. I don't agree. It's obvious Luke would have told Ahsoka that he refused to fight his father at first. Ahsoka was simply projecting that knowledge onto this version of Anakin Skywalker, which comes totally from her mind and her insecurities and doubts about how she'll ultimately judge and, if necessary, integrate his training into her life. That's why you keep seeing him blip between Vader and Anakin. And for me, I think it's further proved when Anakin tells her that she's more than the training he provided, just as he was more than the things that his master taught him. You're all of those things. And we see Ahsoka learn that when she disarms her version of Anakin and refuses to kill him. Instead, she chooses to live. She's made peace with her past. She made peace with her shadow self, or her shadow warrior. Like I said, this episode changed my view of what I've seen so far, most directly what happened in the previous episode. I get it now. Baylan represents that centrality or neutrality between the extremes. I think that's why he's dressed the way he is and why his lightsaber isn't red exactly, it's more like an orange color. it's because he hasn't gone to either extreme. Unlike, say, Count Dooku from the prequels, who went from being a Jedi to being a Sith. Basically, Dooku traded in one religion or denomination of the Force for another. Baylan's experienced both light and dark, just as Anakin has, but he ultimately found that middle ground, which means that the dialogue between him and Ahsoka in the previous episode had much more going on than I originally recognized. But at this point, this video could go on forever because there's so much more to delve into, and maybe I'll do a separate video talking about these things. But I'll say this, I truly feel that Baylan represents Disney Star Wars' new take on Force users. He's a little bit of both, he's still honorable as we see, and I think he's truly saddened when fighting Ahsoka because although she's not a Jedi, she's still so dogmatic into one side of her understanding of the Force that he can't help her achieve true balance. It always comes down to either they kill him or he kills them. And for a true occultist or new Force user who's found true balance, all he wants to do is help other Force users do the same. Yet, he can only give them some guidance and a push in the right direction, which is literally what Baylan did when he knocked Ahsoka off the ledge, thus forcing her to finally take that journey within and do her shadow work. So where do I end up with all of this? Despite all the deep layers in this particular episode and the stunning visuals, I still fault Filoni for not establishing Ahsoka's inner problem earlier. Finding Thrawn is clearly her outer goal, and her failure to train Sabine is a reflection of her attempt to ignore her shadow warrior. She's afraid that she'll train, Sabine or anybody else the same way Anakin trained her, but did Anakin really train her bad? It depends on her perspective and her understanding and her coming to terms with her background. But the key elements of that story of failing to train Sabine or walking away from it took place off screen, and we're just told these things. Say what you will about George Lucas and his prequels, he understood the concept of show and tell better than we give him credit. He knew he was going to end with Anakin becoming Darth Vader. So what was the furthest distance he can go from that ending? He chose to begin with this innocent little boy named Anakin. Likewise, when you look at the Andor series, we know Andor becomes a loyal member of the rebellion. So where do we begin his journey? We begin with him living his current life and getting stuck in a no-win situation that forces him to make a decision that reveals his character, his starting point. And we see him grow and become a true rebel throughout the series. I know Ahsoka's been around for some time, but we needed that kind of setup of her present condition internally as well as externally, and that wasn't done. We need to see the solid character arcs on screen and not just leave it for us fans to do all the mental gymnastics to fill in the background and the details. So anyway, that's my review of the 5th episode of Ahsoka entitled Shadow Warrior, or as I like to say, Shadow Work. It was definitely a strong and powerful episode. I just wish the build-up episodes had been as equally as strong and compelling. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next video.